Good morning. I'm back on a Saturday. Said I was going to switch days, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. It was busy this week and didn't get a chance to record. So back for Saturday for now. Probably next week I will change, but I don't know what day yet, so I'll have to let you know. So this week I'm going to talk about transitions. And it's so funny because when I got on Facebook, I saw someone else had posted about being in the space of in between, which is what a transition is. It's kind of like a winter in life, as opposed to a winter in the world, but a time when nothing is happening in the physical world. The fields are fallow, right? The trees are bare. The flowers are dormant. I mean, like everything is kind of asleep to the world. Even the animals are snuggled in their dens. So it's a quiet time, and for us, it's a quiet time of being in the unknown. Good morning. And what's challenging, one of the challenging things about this particular time is that it can feel like a death. It can feel like a death to the point where, and I've had this happen on many occasions where I'm in this space and I'm starting to question like my guides and check up with my intuition. Am I dying? Because that's what it can feel like. And what often happens in this phase is when people don't understand that that's a part of the phase itself, that you actually have that feeling, is that they can mistake it for that being literal and feel like, that's oftentimes when people might feel like they need to commit suicide or do something more drastic, but it's really a phase of transition. And so it's important to understand that and to understand the magnitude of what the feelings can be during this phase. That's the level of challenge it can have, the level of fear that can get evoked by it, because in a sense, the ego is experiencing a death because there's some change happening. And as we evolve in consciousness, it's a natural part of that shift is to actually experience that transition. And so the more that we can understand it, the more we can kind of create space for ourselves and allow that fear, which when I did a lot of inner work, when I hit the point of starting to process fear, I was like, oh my gosh, I had been processing emotion for a really long time at that point. But when fear came up, I was like, oh, this is a whole nother level. You don't hear, there's no question about it when you get there. It's like, okay. So to be able to have the tools and to understand that that's what you're in and to know how to be with it and navigate through it can be really helpful in allowing that full transformation to occur. So nature is comfortable with changing seasons. But as humans, and especially in a culture that is Western and is, other cultures maybe as well, but this is what I'm familiar with, where action is favored and progress and summer is like what's valued the most. And when all of that is happening, then that is deemed as right and correct and the way things should be. So it's a challenge when you're in this space to actually not fall into that, the feelings of what the culture has conditioned us to believe, which is that we have to be productive all the time, that we have to make progress all the time. And so it's not understanding that these fallow periods really create the opportunity for a leap. It's not a slow kind of natural ongoing progression that's really, but that there's a leap in consciousness that's trying to happen. And so it's important because this fallow period is when things are changing on the inside. In our culture, we often think change is only when things are changed on the outside. So, for example, if I don't like my job and I want to change jobs, then I think, oh, that's a change if I change the job. But if there's no inner change that correlates with the outer change, then it really isn't. And so what happens for a lot of people is they get into that new situation, and then what do they find? They find that in the new situation that they're in the same thing. It's just a replication of where they were because that inner change didn't happen. Right. So the fairy tales also have transitions in them. And sometimes they're different. Sometimes it's almost the entire story that's mapping out a transition. So, what this would look like is waiting. And in our culture, waiting is perceived as not a valid part of life. And so the question then would naturally be, well, what's the heroine waiting for? Hmm, rescued by the prince. That must be it, right? So if you've been following me for any period of time, you know she isn't waiting for the prince to rescue her. But in fact, she's doing this inner work. And in this inner work, for the actual true transformations to happen. And so it looks like waiting. And because we don't value that, we automatically think, well, then it must be something else. And we're, of course, as I always say, looking at it literally. So when we're in this transition period, it's going from one level of consciousness to another. So what this can look like as an old story to a new story. So let's say in the past, I would be somebody who was hidden and wasn't out in the world. So to make that transition from being hidden to being out in the world, like say somebody like Cinderella, that leap has to have an inner change, because when you come into the outer, it can create so much fear that you can find yourself going back in if you haven't made that inner transition. I remember when I first made this change, it was the first time I really noticed it was when I was going to teach my first dream workshop. And it was to 3 friends in a shop in my town. And it was so like safe. It was about as safe as it could possibly be. And I was driving to go meet them, and I was just overcome with this sense of fear. And I realized it felt like death. I was afraid what was coming up was that I was going to die. And so my mind knew, well, that's unrealistic. But the feeling that was evoked by the situation, many of us have feelings that believe in past lives, that we've been alive at other times where being seen was not safe, and that being out in the front was not safe, doing things that did not align with the culture's paradigms, what the culture believes in, what the culture values, stepping out of those things, which is really what most of us are here to do. Most of us that are listening to this are here to do exactly that, to move into the new consciousness that we're moving into, so that we can embody it, so that we can create the new earth together. Means that we're going against the cultural conditioning, and it can be frightening at times, because historically that hasn't been a smart thing to do. So you could be shifting from something outdated to being something different, and that can look like family valuing a particular way of being. Like, say for example, our family is sad, and so if I'm moving into a place of happiness, let's say as a child, that happiness was frowned upon. We talked about this, I believe, with Wizard of Oz at the very beginning, when Aunt Em sees Dorothy come and she's all happy and playing with Toto. Aunt Em realizes what she's lost. She realizes, oh, I used to be like that. And now that I've been on the prairie for so long, that part of me died. Not literally, because in a sense, nothing is dead, and so that can always come back. But she realized that in that moment, that part of her was completely, she didn't have access to it. So what would often happen in a family, if this was the case, is because it was so threatening to the mother to see that, to witness that, to be in the presence of that, that she would have to find ways, subtle or overt, to try to shut that down so that she doesn't have to face what she has lost. This is why being able to process the emotion is so critical and so important to being able to shift consciousness. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So this period of uncertainty can rattle us because it's so unfamiliar to be in that uncertainty. There's no way to know what's coming. You don't have a sense of it because you have never been there before. In the fairy tales, this is a point where the father plays a part. This is one of the reasons why the father is so important, and we often see what a really important role he plays to the heroine in the story, right? The mother's typically gone. She's typically morphed into the stepmother, into the witch, into the old woman. So she's no longer the good mother. And we have the father, who is typically passive, but also can be overbearing, especially in life. So the weak father we saw was almost always deferring to the stepmother. She was the one who was calling the shots. She was the one that was determining it. And he's just going along with it. He didn't defend and protect the heroine. That is the role of the father in the story and in life. It's to keep a container that makes it easy, that makes it safe to be who we are and to flower and to feel safe to take chances, to feel it's okay to take risks. And that doesn't happen in a lot of the fairy tales. Many. So what happens is that lack of backup can exacerbate the situation for the feminine. She finds herself struggling because she feels like the world isn't safe. She feels like no one had her back. She had to do it all herself. She felt alone in the world, that she could only depend on herself. She felt uncertain. When she's in uncertainty, it's a feeling that comes up is vulnerability, right? When I was driving to give that talk that day, that I felt very vulnerable because the fear had come up. There's a fear of trusting others and trusting life. So guess what? When you're being guided to surrender and let go of control, you're like, I don't think so. That's not a good idea. That wouldn't be safe. Why? Because growing up, there were no adults in the room. So who is she going to surrender to? We saw this with the handless maiden, right? She walked away from her parents' house as she was shifting that, making that transition out of childhood into adulthood. She said, I have no one but God in that situation. So that's, the universe, the higher self, whatever. But that's a challenge. That is not simple when you have come from a situation where you didn't have that safe container. So what happens in this space is you want to accept not knowing, because this space is being created for something new to emerge. And so it's really learning how to honor this transitional time. And I know that I'm saying this like, well, just accept it and honor it. But I know it's a challenge. So you have to be able to be in it. You are you're trusting, you're building trust with life and yourself. That's absolutely true. And accepting not knowing, right? Because it's completely unfamiliar. You don't know what's coming in essence, like I said, because you haven't been there before. So in this place of accepting, we can open to change and transformation, right? Thinking like the caterpillar in the chrysalis. How would the caterpillar know it's dissolving into liquid in order to change itself, to transform itself, to alchemize itself into something that it has never experienced before? It's not, there's no, of course, on some level, there would be a knowing, but in a kind of an overt thought sense, you wouldn't have, if you were changing from a caterpillar to a butterfly, you would have no idea, like, what is coming? What does this look like? How am I going to, you're going from crawling around eating leaves to flying and eating nectar. We have to think of our own transformations this way. It's that radical. It can be that radical of a change. So we need to allow the uncertainty to be there and not rush to fill the emptiness because it's so uncomfortable and unfamiliar. So it's really, again, processing and knowing how to process the feelings that are coming up, the emotions that are coming up, and being open and aware of the habits. Like, how do I typically approach a situation when I feel chaos, when I feel afraid? When I feel in uncertainty and confusion, what do I typically do? And becoming really aware of the ways that can arise. I notice for myself, when I end up in a place of overwhelm and confusion, I tend to distract myself. I tend to be like, okay, I think I need a break. I think I need to go outside. I'll go check the mail. I'll go check on the flowers, maybe water the flowers. And I caught myself the other day and I was like, okay, back up, stay in it, and allow yourself to really be in it. So these old habits that we've been in and really established since childhood as a way to deal with, especially if we were in a family that was chaotic and had a lot of confusion around it. We found ourselves, finding ways to adapt, finding ways to deal with it and to get through it. So those things can be to a certain degree unconscious. So the more we bring consciousness to it, the more ability we have to change our responses to it and trust it. Because as a child, that wouldn't feel safe. So as an adult, we can see that it actually is okay. We're going to be all right and stay with it. So accepting the way things are. Here we go. This is what you were saying. Build strength, stability, and trust, right? Especially if we can begin to notice, what is our expectation? And if we can just have the expectation of good, if we can just have the understanding, this is for me, then that helps to alleviate some of the fear of the unknown. And so again, here we could go back to looking at Christianity. And so at the beginning, everything was good. When God created everything, it was good in the beginning. And so as we're shifting back into heaven on earth consciousness, as we're transitioning into that, we're going back to this sense of all good, where there's no judgment. There's no sense of this is right and wrong. And other cultures have parables that are about this as well. So it's not just in Christianity. So this is also where we begin to play with the idea, in trust especially, of the universe being a friendly place. Now, again, I understand this may sound a bit Pollyanna, because you could look at a little bit of news or read the headlines and you would be thinking, yeah, she's a little bit crazy thinking that. But the more that we are able to embody this consciousness of the universe is friendly, the more that we are able to see it that way, the more that we are able to not operate in fear. And so in my sense of what's coming, and again, there's no way for me to know 100%, but from the fairy tales and from dreams and from what I see, what I believe is we're getting into a place of no defense and no protection is necessary. So if you think about it, if the universe is a friendly place, then you don't need to defend and protect yourself. I believe energetically, it just puts you in a different place where you don't need that, and so you don't attract that. I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm 100% right on this. It's just my thinking based on what I've seen about what's coming. So in this place of trusting the universe, then we are able to relax and feel ease. That's right. That's why we're breaking the opposite paradigms, so that there's no right and wrong. That's exactly right. And so when you understand that it's all good, then you see what's happening. You see what's happening through, this is happening for me. You're never a victim. And so when you're in that place, you don't have to defend and protect yourself, because you know what's showing up is what you need to deal with, what you need to process, what's coming to you. So we deal with what shows up as a part of our experience, our direct experience, and understanding that in the end, lots of times you might have an experience and you say, oh, this is a tragedy. But in the long term, when you look back on it, you're like, oh, you know what? That was really good because this is what happened. So the more that we're able to shift that, the more that we're able to see things differently. The other thing is that symbolism helps with this immensely, because symbolism and looking at things symbolically helps you to say, okay, if this is happening for us, then how could that be true? And when you see a dream and that's, someone might interpret as a nightmare, you could say, okay, if this is for me and it's just symbolically showing me something, what is it showing me? And take the fear that's being projected onto the situation back. Then we have the ability to see it differently and see what we are being shown. So we're able to relax and feel ease in this place when the universe is friendly. We'll be able to know and trust that all is well and unfolding perfectly. This also creates the opportunity to lean into, and it actually probably to a certain degree requires that we lean into the universal truths that are being revealed, like it's all good, would be one of the things that we can embody and work to embody as we're going through these changes. So the gift of not knowing, when we don't anticipate a particular outcome, we're available to something new that we've never experienced before coming into our reality. And we accept that discomfort of not knowing because it's unfamiliar. That can alleviate some of the anxiety. So it's just really remembering to keep going into that place of acceptance. So this is an initiatory process, and we're transitioning from the old to the new story, from an old version of us into a new one we've never been before. And the mind can't figure it out. We've talked about this before too, that the mind is only based on the past. So it doesn't have the ability to anticipate what's coming, which is typically how we safely navigated our way through the world in a way that really wasn't true and accurate, because we pretended we knew what was coming, but we actually really didn't. We have this kind of habit of like driving a car where you're really not paying attention, you're just doing it because you just anticipate the same thing that was there before, but that's just not always the case. So that's why you might be reminding yourself at times to really like refocus and pay attention, because you remember like, okay, wait a minute, I need to really be present here. I can't just accept and believe that the same thing that happened before is going to happen again. So the mind isn't able to figure out what's coming, but the intuition can help. The bodily knowing can help. There can be a sense of really tuning into the body as a way to relax and to find ease, and to be aware of what the body is doing through this phase is also helpful, because you might find, like, if you can remind yourself to keep going back to the body to feel what is the body doing. Is it tense? Can I just relax my shoulders? Can I just relax my belly? And just really having awareness also of shifting that bodily response to the situation as well. So we can feel lost, confused, uncertain, uncomfortable, but all of this is okay during the change. Lost, confused, uncertain, and uncomfortable. So really allowing those things in space. So it's almost like you're with a little child, and the child that you were, that no one might have been there for in childhood when you experience the chaos, the uncertainty, and we're in the midst of some kind of change. So imagine as a child, let's just say something like moving to a new area, you would be completely freaked out because children like structure, they like certainty, it makes them feel safe. And so just a move would move them into a new neighborhood, into a new school potentially. Like there's a whole rash of, and back in the day when I grew up, maybe when you grew up, people weren't so worried about like, how is little Jane gonna handle the transition? So that wasn't a big thing that was being thought through. So we might have come up with our own ways of managing. So, what do we do when these challenging emotions come up? Sit and allow them. Same thing as everything else. Sit and accept it. And so, what I teach is to, in sitting and accepting, is to go into the body and see, where is this coming from? And see, what is the sensation and where is it showing up in my body? And then it's just accepting it, because there's this magic about consciousness, and consciousness has the ability to transform things just through witnessing, just through seeing. We've talked about that before as well, how that is an important thing that often comes up in fairy tales and is a transformational experience for the heroines at times, is just seeing, just witnessing, just being aware of what's coming up. So you do the same thing with the emotion, bringing awareness to it, bringing acceptance to it. Again, like a child. It's like having a child sitting on your lap and she's afraid or she's sad, and it's just letting the emotion flow and focusing in the body on where it arises. And as you're doing this, you're clearing these things from childhood, those experiences that you might have had when you were young, where that emotion wasn't allowed to process correctly. It wasn't allowed to be expressed and supported. And so this is what we're doing, is transforming these things in ourselves. So we're also, as I was started at the beginning talking about the Father, this is the time when we're transforming the Father in our consciousness. So he was weak and he was passive. He didn't defend and protect. So what we're doing is we're not actually going back to that, because that might have been in the past the role that he played, but we're shifting into a new place where he, in a sense, is defending and protecting only with regard to standing up for ourselves, to speaking up for ourselves, to saying, like, what am I dreaming about? What is it that I want in life? And having that ability to honor that and to take action on that, and to be able to speak up for yourself and do things that he would have played that role in childhood. So this is going to resolve whatever outstanding feelings there may have been with him as well, and that will come up through this process, because that is such a critical part of being in the unknown, is having that strong masculine container there as well. So when the heroine leaves the Father, she's transitioning to a stronger, more aligned inner masculine who has her back. So I've seen this even in my dreams, where, like, literally the masculine was like standing right against my back. So it's to help us shift that to a sense of it being a part of us, as opposed to looking outside for it. We are able to transform this inner masculine in ourselves, and then potentially changing then what we attract in the outer world. So ideally, in this phase, we would be excited. We would be saying, yay, something amazing is on its way. A greater truth is emerging that I'm embodying. And life is going to be more aligned on the other side of this. So it's important to let go of those safety mechanisms we have in place that may not be honoring us anymore. And we can sometimes hold on to the familiar out of fear of the uncertainty and not knowing what's coming. But it's easier if we can just kind of let it go a little bit. Just sit with it maybe, and allow the energy of connection and holding to lessen. So there is this story about a photographer. I don't think I've told this before. And he was taking pictures of people on a roller coaster. And so he would take the picture just as the roller coaster came over the top and was starting to go down. And he took this, he get home, he develops them, and he notices there's two different kinds of people. There are the people who hold on, their knuckles are white, and they're screaming. And then there are the people with their arms thrown up in the air that are also screaming, but they've let go. So we have a choice through these processes of transformation and transition where we can be the kind of people who are white knuckling it through. And maybe at the beginning we are. Maybe because, if you've been really challenged, we have compassion for ourselves and give ourselves a lot of space if that's what we need to clear. If we need to hold on, then we just have compassion for ourselves. But if you can just, even at times for brief periods, put your arms up in the air and say something amazing is coming, then that creates that openness, that possibility for that space for that situation to emerge for you and to begin to see it emerging, which is also helpful right now. Because if you don't know, if it's unexpected, but if you're expecting to see the good coming, then you begin to widen your focus to see evidence that it's actually happening, that the transition is actually moving forward, and that you're beginning to see that things are changing and moving towards whatever it is, your dream, your new self, the embodiment, and noticing when other people especially are commenting on that you're different and that you're changing. And take those things in, allow them to really land, accept them, and allow them to really settle inside of you, that you are making this, you are being successful at this transformation. So you can have that excitement of a child that you probably had, most likely you did in childhood. You might be able to tap into that. You might remember what it felt like to wake up on Christmas morning. You might remember that you woke up anticipating good. My guides have told me for years, they're like, you can live life that way. You could live life that way excited, because really every day is the unknown. Every day has the capacity to be amazing. So when you're able to approach it like a child, right? To become like a child, to enter the kingdom is what Christianity says. So we expect good, believe the world and life was on our side. That's what many of us thought, at least at times in childhood, or in certain circumstances in childhood. Maybe even in challenging circumstances, we might have also had access to this more optimistic way of perceiving the world. And we were able to relax more into the unknown as children, right? Sometimes we were so anticipated good through that. So we have the capacity still to put our hands in the air and scream with delight as we careen through uncertainty. At least it can be a hope. At least it can be like a goal. Maybe one day, right, this would be the outcome. I'll remember the day that I throw my hands into the air and be excited about going through transformation. So, despite what it feels like at times, you're on your way. You can do it. I believe in you. I know you can. You've had transitions before, and you've come through them, and you can do it again. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming. And like I said, next week I'll be trying probably for a different day, but I haven't figured out what day yet. So good luck with your transformations. So when I start to get the hint from the universe to talk about something, excuse me, every time I get on, my nose is itchy. When the universe tells me to talk about something, I usually know, oh, this is like, I'm not the only one going through this, and the people around me aren't the only ones going through this. This is happening on a much bigger level than just us. So that's also sometimes helpful to remember that what you're doing is not just for you. You're doing it for, generations out, generations back, for the culture, for the collective. We're all in this together. We're all doing it together. So, yeah, we're going to do it. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for coming. See you next week.